What is up, guys? Lone Hawk here today, and welcome back to Overwatch. In today's video, we are going to be going over some common misconceptions I see players having either in-game, in the comment section of my videos, or just other places Overwatch is discussed. Things these players believe to be true that completely aren't. And we're going to go through a bunch of them today and hopefully clear them all up for you. Today's video is sponsored by Jacked. Sign up for free at the link in the description and get rewarded for playing your favorite games, Overwatch included. You're already playing, so might as well get rewarded. Up first, we have one that I think will help you guys a lot on my channel because I tend to talk about the meta a lot. My most recent video was largely meta influenced. So our first misconception is that you have to play the pro meta, or really the meta in general. The meta and the pro meta are both there to determine which heroes are best at the highest level of play and higher levels of play. If you are not a master player or a diamond player, it really shouldn't matter as much. These are just the optimal hero picks that should be used if you're performing very well. At lower ranks, there are definitely heroes that perform better than at higher ranks, like Bastion and Torbjorn, for example, are two great examples of this. So you don't have to stick to the meta. If someone on your team isn't playing a meta hero, don't bash them for it. Don't get mad at them for it. They might be good on that hero, and also you may not be at the level where the meta heroes are necessary for you. They're just recommended. The next misconception is one that actually I struggle with, and a lot of my teammates struggle with as well, and I've seen it, I have recordings of it. It happens to the best of players. If you're playing a hero and that hero isn't working well, you need to switch right away. But what a lot of players will do if they're close to getting their ult or they have their ult is they'll respawn and try to use their ult in the fight, even though the hero they're playing isn't doing well. The misconception is, I need to use my ult before I switch heroes. This is false. Let's say you're playing Roadhog and you're just not having the best of games. Either you're missing your hooks or the enemy team composition just counters you and you know you need to switch. But wait, you have a whole hog ready. Do you switch right away or try to run back in the fight to use your whole hog? Unless you have something to really combo your ultimate with, there's no reason to just try to run back in the fight and ult, because chances are a few things will happen. One, right when you get into the fight, there's not a good chance that there's going to be a good opportunity to ult. You'll have to wait to use your ult. And if you're waiting to use your ult as a hero that isn't doing well right now, chances are you're not actually going to be able to use that ult. And if you are, it'll cost you your life or it won't be very good. So if you know that you need to switch heroes, do it right away, forget about the ultimate, and get back into the fight without wasting time. Up next, we have a misconception that some may think contradicts my last one, but it really doesn't. This one is simply the belief that if your team is doing bad, you need to switch your team composition. This isn't always the case. My team has done it, I've seen enemy teams do it, and the reality is, if you're not doing well in a game, it isn't always the team composition that's the problem. Sometimes it's just your team not playing well, someone's not pulling their weight, or the enemy team is better than you. So don't immediately switch team composition whenever you're doing bad. Try to think of different strategies. Try to think of how your team actually matches up against the enemy team, because sometimes a composition switch is needed. However, most of the time, problems can be solved in other ways. For example, if the enemy Genji is messing you guys up, I've seen lots of teams switch to Winston to deal with the Genji. And while Winston does counter Genji, he doesn't counter Genji that well. Not as well as a coordinated team that can focus the Genji down without needing a Winston. Winston can do the job, but the reality is, if you deal with the Genji first, he's diving your back line, then you have a 6v5 and you can take out the rest of the enemy team. It's things like this you need to be thinking about, and not always the team composition. This next one is for you support players out there, and this misconception is the I died, who was supposed to be watching me, it's not my fault misconception. Lots of support players seem to believe that it's the job of their team to watch their backs and keep them alive, which is kind of true. You definitely want to keep your supports alive, but it's not always your team's fault. Sometimes no one could really be watching you because there was a fight to be happening and people just die in the game. Sometimes it is unpreventable, and sometimes it's your fault as a support player. I've seen support players who keep doing the exact same thing. They keep getting killed by the same person over and over again. They keep blaming their team and they don't do anything about it. If someone is flanking you and killing you repeatedly, you need to do something about it. Maybe be on the lookout, play a little bit more forward, that way you're with your team when they flank you, or switch to someone like like Lucio, who can peel for himself from enemy flankers. Basically, just try to look for ways to keep yourself alive. If you keep dying, it's not your team's fault, it's your fault. If you die every once in a while, well, that's gonna happen. That happens in Overwatch. I do admit there are some times when your team should be helping you and watching your back. That is true. However, more often than not, it is the player's fault for dying and not their team. Which brings us into our next misconception, which is a very basic one, and it's the everyone else sucks and they're holding me back and we're losing because my team is terrible misconception. I made a whole video about this a while back saying that it's not your team's fault. You should take full responsibility for anything that happens to you. Even if it's not your fault, you want to pretend like it was. Because when you pretend like it was your fault, you can then look for ways to prevent that in the future. Even things that aren't your fault can be prevented by you. So having this mindset that everything is not your team's fault, but a collective fault of everybody, including yourself, is going to be much better and you will improve in the game. Up next, we have a brutal one that'll probably shock a bunch of you DPS players out there, maybe even some tanks. And it's hard to grasp for some people, but this misconception is the I have gold damage and or I have gold eliminations, so it's not my fault. I'm doing something. I matter. You know what? Having gold eliminations and or gold damage is nice, but it doesn't mean you're impacting the game as much as someone else on your team. If you're not playing the objective and you're just going for kills, you may have gold elims, but you're not helping your team very much. It's things like this you need to be aware of. Looking at your medals in-game is totally fine. Everyone does it and it's great. However, I wouldn't base your decisions off of your medals. Your whole team could be doing bad and you're just doing a little bit better than them and you may have gold medals because of it. It doesn't mean you're being the best you can be. It doesn't mean you're impacting the game as much as you can be. Gold elims and gold damage can be pretty misleading. If you have gold elims, it could mean you're just kind of stealing kills right as your teammates are getting them. You just happen to be involved in more kills. It doesn't mean you're doing more. And gold damage can mean absolutely nothing if the enemy team heals up that damage. So both of them can be very misleading. If you're not doing well as a team, don't go and brag saying, I have gold elims, I have gold, damage, you guys need to fix it. Be a part of the fix. Try to win the game, because in the end, all that matters is if you won or lost. I mean, sure, you'll have some statistics that occurred when you were in the game, like accuracy, amount of kills, and all of that. But in the end, the only thing that affects your skill rating, the thing people brag most about, nobody brags about their accuracy on McCree, unless you're me. The only thing that matters is win or loss. So just go for the win, forget about the medals, and just play the game. The next one, I'm sure you all know. I'm sure you've all done this, even though you know you shouldn't. I've done it, even though I know I shouldn't. And this one is, we have 5 teammates, let's go for a push. Your 6th guy either died or he's just leaving spawn or something, and you have 5 people and you decide to push the enemy team, who has all 6. This seems okay a lot of the time. Maybe you have some good ultimates to combo, and sometimes a 5v6 will work. However, waiting is going to be better 99% of the time. And if you had enough people to take it with 5, well, guess what? That 6th person is just going to make it easier. There is no reason not to wait for that 6th man unless the game is seriously about to end. Go for the push once you have your full team. If you only have 5, if you have 5 or less, don't do it. No matter what, just wait it out and don't do it. Our second to last tip is once again about team compositions, and it's the misconception that having only one healer is okay and having only one tank is okay, or any combination thereof. I actually got downvoted on Reddit the other day for saying that a composition that consisted of one healer, one tank, and 4 DPS was bad. Obviously, those people don't know a lot about Overwatch, because you will not win many games with 4 DPS heroes, 1 support, and 1 tank. Ignoring the meta for a second, having 2 supports or more is pretty much mandatory. You really need that healing and the benefits that the other supports provide. If we do take a look at the meta, we'll know a few things. For one, there have been both triple tank and triple support team compositions run recently, and no DPSs were run in those comps, which, if anything, means that you should be running less DPSs, yet some people believe that having 4 or 3 is okay. You should never have more than 2 DPS heroes. It's okay to have extra tanks, it's okay to have extra supports, depending on the composition you're running, but I promise you right now, there is no truly competitive composition that consists of 4 DPS heroes, or really even 3. 3 is a stretch because you might be able to say, okay, Mei is technically a DPS, but she's also technically a tank. She's kind of both. So there are fine lines there. Just remember though, having only one healer or having only one tank is not okay. Even if you're the best DPS player in your team will do better if you go and fill the role it needs. And finally, our last misconception is a weird one. It's one that someone actually talked to me about, and it makes a lot of sense to me now that I've thought about it. And it's the misconception that communication is the same thing as teamwork. Because if you think about it, communication and teamwork are very different things. You can be communicating to your team, you can be explaining what's going on, making good calls, explaining why you need someone to switch heroes maybe, or focus down a certain target, but unless they actually do that, or unless they actually do it well and do it with you and you guys work together, it's not teamwork. I mean, sometimes I watch replays of videos where someone said like 10 times in a game, hey, we need someone to deal with this hero, and they're the support and they can't deal with them, but nobody else switches. That is not playing as a team. Just because you're communicating doesn't mean your team has good teamwork and good synergy. So go back and watch your own gameplays, hopefully with your voice and your team's voice in that, or just try to think back to things that weren't addressed or were addressed and weren't solved, and try to improve your teamwork and not your communication. Because oftentimes communication is not the problem, it's actually listening to what other people have to say and actually doing what they say. That's the teamwork component, and that's what you need to work on. That concludes today's videos of very common misconceptions I see in Overwatch. If there's one I missed or one you disagree on, be sure to leave me a comment down below and we can discuss it down there. If you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like and follow me on Twitter at LoneHawk. That's a 0, not an O, to be notified of whenever I go live, whenever I'm like live streaming or doing fun stuff with you guys. And be sure to subscribe. I will see you guys all later. LoneHawk out.